I am so excited to be here with Maddy Niebauer today. She is the owner, founder, CEO of vChief, which is an organization that helps leaders with having a seasoned partner to help them through all the hard things, overwhelming things, and be even better as a leader and also better for their organization. So, Maddy comes with an extensive background in corporate, nonprofit, consulting, and she was actually a chief of staff herself. So vChief provides chiefs of staff for organizations. Maddy not only runs her business, but also is a mom, a partner, and also loves to travel. Welcome with your MBA from Columbia and also fellow Stanford grad. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So, Maddy, the reason that I was particularly excited, all the things, but particularly because you are a world traveler. In fact, you were in the
Yeah.
Peace Corps after Stanford and the Ivory Coast. And when I learned about you, you had actually started this business, vChief, while living abroad in South America. And that's just, I mean, lots of oxymorons here, right? Starting a business, living abroad. Did you have three kids at the time?
I did. Yeah.
And then you did it for 8 months. So just can you tell me about how
Yeah.
that happened?
Absolutely. Well, I've loved travel since I was young and was fortunate to be able to start that journey young. And my husband and I traveled a lot before we had kids. And then after we had kids, we have three kids. The younger two are twins. So you can imagine life was really crazy when they were young. But by the time they were four, we felt like, okay, you know what, like we can manage life now, which took a while to get back to. And we were excited to sort of show our kids the world. So we started taking pretty long trips abroad when they were 4 and 6. And we started with like a month in Mexico, and then we did a month in Costa Rica. And it was the month in Costa Rica where I was transitioning out of Teach for America and really launched the idea for vChief. And then the following year, we spent 6 months in South America. And then the year after that, we spent 6 months in Asia. And then ever since then, we've basically spent 1 to 2 months abroad. We typically do it in the winter because we live in Wisconsin and it's cold here. And we pull our kids normally go to public school, but we pull our kids out of school and we world school them. And world schooling looks really different for everyone who does it. Some people are unschoolers and they just sort of use what they're doing in a day-to-day basis to teach their kids. We were a bit more on the structured side, especially because we knew our kids had to go in and out of school and we wanted them to be successful when they were in the school setting. So even we tried a few different things. Like we did one year that was really structured curriculum. They had videos that they watched. They brought books with them. And then other years, we've just said, let's do some reading, writing, and math. We try to keep up with the same math curriculum they're doing in school, just so that they can stay on track. And then obviously, sort of they learn from the places that we're going. This past winter, we went to Tanzania and we went on a safari, and then we also went to Egypt on a trip with other world schooling families. And so we got to tour all the historic sites of Egypt with other families and, build bonds with them. And also, it was just really neat to see these kids who are like really passionate about Egyptian history, like teaching my kids what they know about the different gods and all these things. And it was just such a really amazing, powerful experience. And I feel super blessed to be able to do that. And that was one reason that I started my company as a virtual company so that, we could do it from anywhere and everyone who works for me could do whatever they want from anywhere.
I mean, you're the model, right? Like women who want
Yeah.
it all. People say, well, you can't have it all. You can have one thing at a time. And I think, okay, we have a pie. So let's get clear. There is a pie of 24 hours a day,
It's
7 days a
true.
week. I'm not saying like Maddy has like thousands of hours, so she can do whatever. But at the same time, you have a pie. And if you get clear on your values, which you obviously are clear that adventure, travel, world, seeing the world as a family is important, you can then
Yeah.
configure your life. So I just wanted to say that clarity of vision, which started way back when with your partner before kids, Peace Corps, et cetera, has continued. You don't have to stop all the things. So
Yeah,
amazing. So
absolutely.
I actually want to get detailed because
Yeah.
often you say, well, that's such a good idea, but not for me. I want to, but because the kids are, they're going to miss school. So can you,
Yeah.
because you're in Wisconsin, public schools do that?
It's really tricky, and it actually does vary a lot state to state. And it varies what kind of school your kid is and whether you can yank them out and stick them back in. We are very fortunate that our kids just go to a traditional standard public school. They don't have to have a lottery or anything to get in it. We're also lucky that Wisconsin has pretty liberal homeschool laws. So you just have to sign a piece of paper that says you're going to educate your kids, and then they let you do whatever you want with them. And there are state laws that say, like, if you take your kids out and put them back in, they can't like punish you or put them down a year or other things like that. So, but I know in other states there are different rules and regulations. So to the extent that people want to do this, they should look up their state rules. But we had some friends who are world schoolers who from Chicago, and their kids were in like a magnet school or some sort of charter school that had like specific spots. And if they left, they were going to lose those spots. And so they had to make some hard decisions about like what they valued and what was more important to them. And I think I think a lot of times world schoolers will decide, oh, we're just going to do one big trip and then come back, right? I think we are a little bit unique in that we don't do it full time forever, because there's other families who do that too. But we sort of keep doing it every year. And it took some conversations with the school. I will say they weren't necessarily in love with us, but like the teachers were always like, that's so amazing. We're so excited for you. And the administration's like, you're going to miss it again this year. And we're like, yeah,
So you do it from December through Jan, like
it depends. Yeah, the year. We've often gone like January and February, so we'll leave after winter break or during winter break sometimes, and then usually we're back either towards the end of January or by like President's Weekend. And honestly, I think actually we're gonna stop doing such extended travel because our eldest is now in high school, and so it seems like she might need to. So we might take an extra week here or there. We're talking about maybe going to the Galapagos, high on the list for everyone.
So great. It's so great.
Yeah.
There have, I've heard Maddy, another friend of mine, she left and lives abroad. She was a CEO of a nonprofit. She left and lives abroad now. She consults and coaches like online. She does a long
Nice.
1 to 2 years in a location, tries to learn the language with her child. There are so many different ways. And this conversation, Maddy, I think opens up that we don't have to pause life, right? As moms with young kids, we can have the things that matter to us.
I absolutely like I'm all for figuring out the ways to have it all. We have lots of good friends who sort of saw what we did and they're like, oh, wait, you can do that. And we have friends who went and lived on a sailboat for like a year and a half, and other people who, moved to Ecuador for the summer or whatever. Not everyone obviously has like the privilege to be able to uproot their lives for long periods of time, but there are ways to make it work.
Okay, so Maddy, because you're a systems person, let's
Yeah.
talk about systems. And in terms of,
Yeah.
well, I would like to consider doing that. What would you say are things to consider, how to actually take it on the court?
Yeah. I think first and foremost is figuring out like your income, right? Like, can you keep your job? Do you need to ask for a leave of absence? Do you like do this as a transition between jobs? I think there's a big difference. We met other traveling families, some of whom were sort of, they built up a bunch of savings and they're spending it down and then they're going to go back to work when they're done. I think there's a little bit of a different way that feels or mentality than if you're actually earning money while you're on the road. And if you are earning money on the road, what does that look like? Do you have to work certain amounts of hours or certain times? And do you have to have a good internet connection? Because that will really inform the ways that you travel and whether or not you can, do faster travel, slower travel, be on a boat, be, taking planes, trains, and automobiles. So I think thinking about that piece of it first is really important. And then there's all the other like logistical things, like what do you do with your house, right? Do you rent it? Because that's an expense that will continue when you're not there. For our 2 6-month trips, we rented our house out during that time. For our shorter trips, we've chosen not to, just because it seemed like more of a hassle than it was worth. But there's lots of ways to do that. There's also house exchange options. Like I'm in several groups that people do that. So there's like the logistical pieces of it. And then I think the third thing I'd think about, obviously, if you have kids, is the schooling and what what is your vision for what schooling would look like if you were out there? There's, as I said, so many different ways to do that. And how do you think about that if you have kids who have, special learning needs? One of our kids is dyslexic, and we found out shortly before our trip to Asia, he was diagnosed, and we ended up having like two different tutors that were doing Zoom tutoring with him while we were on the road, right? And so we did take a moment to pause and say, are we making the right decision? Like, are we harming our kids' education? But we felt like ultimately we could pull it off, and I don't think they're any worse for wear because of it. So those are some of like the concrete things I would say. And then some resources that are out there. There's, if you go on Facebook and look up World School, World Schooler, World Schooling, like half a dozen Facebook groups, which are an amazing place to like connect with other families. And that's how we've met with other families when we're traveling. And our kids have made some friendships that, I think will last a really long time. So those are some of the like tactical tips to pull that off.
So helpful. Can you talk about your favorite countries?
I'm not going to list the countries we've been to because there are a lot, but we've done most of South America, a lot of Central America. We've done most of East Asia, certainly not all of it, but a lot, especially Southeast Asia. And Europe, we've only been to England. I really want to go to Australia and New Zealand, but I haven't made it there with kids. Favorite places. I think for natural beauty, one of my favorite places is Patagonia. And we did this drive called the Carretera Austral, which goes down southern Chile. And it's a little bit of a rough road. Most of it's paved now, so it's not that bad, but it goes through the most natural beauty places you've ever seen. And you take ferries and you do all sorts of interesting things. And then in southern Patagonia, Torres del Paine and El Chalten are both just extraordinarily beautiful places and just incredible, hiking and mountains and other things like that. And then on the more like cultural side, I really liked Laos, and Luang Prabang was a really amazing city. The way that it's sort of situated along a river with these mountains, and they have these monks who come out every morning.
Tell me, Maddy, did you have this vision when you were a kid? Like little Maddy had this dream. I'm going to be a business owner. I'm going to be traveling around the world. Like, where did
no, not at all. I mean, I was fortunate to be able to travel a bit as a kid. My grandma took me on this grandparents, grandchildren tour to Europe when I was 14. And amusingly, my mom just did a similar thing with my daughter and took her to Paris this summer with a bunch of other grandparents and grandkids, which was super fun. So I knew that I was excited about travel and other cultures. And then in school, I didn't get to study abroad because I actually transferred to Stanford halfway through. So I kind of had to finish all my credits there. So when I finished school, I knew I wanted to spend some time abroad and was excited to join the Peace Corps and do it that way. And that, I think, was when I was really like, oh, I just love immersing myself in other cultures and learning about other people. My best friend from high school took this like really extended trip. I think it was about a year with her husband before kids. And I was like, that seems amazing. I would like to do that. But didn't really have the resources to pull that off for a whole year. So then it was, Mike and I took like a 3-month trip through the South Pacific. Once we had kids, we knew we wanted to do something, but I didn't ever have this vision of like, I'm going to own a company and do this whole thing. I mean, I had always had entrepreneurial thoughts, but I don't know that I ever thought I was going to be, a founder and a business owner.
So this arc of your life, when you're thinking about having it all and being able to do that with your partner, your business, your kids, when you get, and I had heard you talk about the 4-hour work week. Can you say, of this book, when I read it, here are the takeaways that I've really tried to implement in my life that have made a huge difference to make this happen?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the main tenet of that book is to stop trading your time for money, which I think is just this concept that like your time is a limited resource and you're never gonna, be able to go beyond however many hours you spend, right? And so unless you are building something that goes beyond just trading your time for money, you will never really have time freedom, right? So whether that's creating a business or investing in real estate or doing any of those things, it is like just the concept that like a salary will only get you so far. And so that I think was the biggest thing for me. And even as I started vChief, our model is to match fractional chiefs of staff. Typically, sometimes we do like interim COO and other roles, but our bread and butter is chiefs of staff. And so we match them with leaders who they're being their right hand partner for. I was a chief of staff. I was doing that work, right? And so when I started vChief, I kept one client, a former boss and mentor of mine. And then I had the decision to make. Do I take on more clients myself, or do I hire other people to take on the clients and then spend my own time building the business? And at that time, it felt really risky to hire other people, because then, if I'm doing the work, I get all the money. If I hire other people, I only get some margin of the money. And, you're sort of starting out, you're trying to figure out whether this is going to work. So it felt a little nerve-wracking at the time, but it was absolutely the right decision, because then it allowed me to spend the time doing the things that would make vChief grow, right? And so immediately I started hiring people and really turned it into more of a matchmaking service than like Maddy being a chief of staff to a handful of people. So those were, I think, the biggest lessons that I took away.
So Maddy, talk about that leap, because you and I know a lot of consultants, especially coming from education and trying to make a difference, but also have more flexibility. And I'm curious, what got you over the hump to say, okay, I'm going to take this risk and be able to hire people, because that then kind of guarantees that you have to make a certain amount of revenue to allow you to live. I mean, paycheck, right?
Yeah. I was in a fortunate position. I was leaving Teach for America as part of like a second round of big layoffs. And because I was our budget and headcount manager for our team, I knew several months before that the layoffs were going to happen, and basically sort of wrote my own team off the org chart, which is sad, but it was gonna happen. Like that, we ran big conferences and they were decreasing in size, and that just didn't make sense to continue to do. And so I had a long window to like get a lot of the elements of the business up and running, and then like before I left Teach for America, and then I was on severance for a handful of months after that. So I mean, I will say like that was a privilege that is not everybody has when they're starting a business. So I was sort of like, well, we'll try this for a few months, and if it doesn't work, I can just get more clients and do the work myself. So it was a little bit of just like an experimentation period. And then the other nice thing that was that like coming out of that period of time at Teach for America, so many people, well, a lot of amazing talent went on the market suddenly, but also like so many people were starting new things and were just really supportive of each other. There was like this ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship, and people just wanted to help each other. So like I got so many referrals, both of people to work for us and of clients from that Teach for America network. Is amazing.
It's helpful to hear the steps, and also just to also name that there's some privilege here, that taking risks, there was actually a little bit of a ramp off, and to allow that ramp to also then blossom into lots of referrals and connections. So I really appreciate that. So Maddy, you're I say this lovingly, you're a bit of an oxymoron in that you're doing all the things, and I want to just talk about these myths, because you're a myth breaker. And for you, in thinking through your own, I've learned that you're having to have confidence, right? And then believing in yourself that you can take risks, you can do these things. What myths did you have to learn weren't true?
I mean, I think there's this myth that you have to live this conventional life, right? That society says you have to like get married and have kids and have this house and have a job that pays for it all, and watch your kids get successful and go off to college and do these things, right? And I think there's part of us that as people who are successful and driven people, like you're like, okay, this is what one does in life, right? And so I think just being able to say, hey, actually, like you don't have to follow all the like rules that you think are out there for you, that you can be different, that you can educate your kids differently, you can have your relationship be different. There's like so many ways that you can just sort of step outside of the norm. Um, I think, I think another thing that's really interesting to think about is sort of the role of women in relationships. And I have always been the primary breadwinner in our relationship ever since I got my MBA. That sort of gives you a little bit of a leg up. My husband was a hydrogeologist for years, which he was passionate about, but it's not an incredibly lucrative career, right? And so, I think there's some myths around like family style and men being breadwinners. I mean, in a traditional, heterosexual relationship. And I'm not going to say there haven't been like moments that was difficult in our relationship, but I think just being able to be like, no, you know what? It's okay that I am the breadwinner, and it's okay that I am the business owner. And my husband at this point doesn't have a full-time job and probably won't ever get one again. Um, and we're lucky that, vChief has been successful enough that he doesn't have to, right? But, and he does lots of things, right? Like we have investment properties that he manages, and he's on the board and a naturalist at our local conservancy. So like he finds meaning and in other things he does. But like I would say that's pretty untraditional. And I think you sort of have to put up with like society's expectations, right? Like there's still people who are like, so what's Mike doing these days? But Mike and I are both, perfectly happy with how things are, right? So yeah.
Maddy, the idea of a partner being supportive and also humble, right? To be able
Yeah.
to, not that he's not working, but not to follow the traditional father or manly, I'm the breadwinner. It is important to pick that right partner. And I want to just underscore that because we often don't talk about this. Like, I don't know if you learned about it at Columbia. I did not at Northwestern, which is where I went to business school, but that was not a class on like in your designing your life, which I did not take. There's also the partner piece, selecting not just the person that you're attracted to and you love, but also do we have enough flexibility to break norms or to have a vision that will allow you maybe to take the back seat while I, take this other career choice. Talk to me about the women that you've met in, I'll say, breaking the molds. What do you find in common about what they have been able to do in their life that allows them to have it all?
I think it's like centering the non-work thing, right? It's saying like my priority is to live this lifestyle or live into my passions, whatever that is, in our case and in the world schoolers case, it's generally travel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like, I want to spend time with my kids before they grow up. And this is something that's like super important to me, right? And I think by saying like, that is in fact my priority as opposed to work, and I'm going to figure out what works with that lifestyle, right? And so I might have to transition out of like a big corporate job or something else, and then I have to figure out what's going to work for me. And a lot of them do some sort of like independent consulting, or sometimes they sort of create new businesses or other things like that, right? Some of which go smashingly and some of which are not that great, right? Like there's only so many people who can be successful travel bloggers, right? And so that's not to say I discourage people from doing that, but like know that you're not going to make any money for the first few years, right? But we met this family that's amazing. They're like travel bloggers, so they're videographers. That was their career before they left the States. And so they would do like big corporate things, they would do weddings, all sorts of things. And now they have these crazy YouTube channels, and they're like famous in like various places in the world. They did all this stuff in the Philippines. They're like YouTube Philippine stars. It's hilarious. And like people will come up to them all over the place and be like, and they're very recognizable. Like they have lots of tattoos, and she has a pink mohawk, and they're just amazing, amazing people, right? And now they're traveling with their RV all over the US. And so they like found ways to take their skills and create it in an environment that works sort of wherever they are, right? And so they have this course for like kids to learn video skills, and they also have their YouTube stuff. And it's just like people come up with all sorts of interesting things. We have another friend, Karen, who's the one who ran our trip to Egypt. So she founded this thing called World Schooling Central, and it's like a website that has a lot of resources, and she runs one of the Facebook groups. And so she started planning these trips as part of their like income thing. And now I think she has another business that is helping people with like technology. Fascinating what people will come up with when they decide like this is what I want to do and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this happen.
It's this decision, right? What do you want
Yeah.
when you're clear about what matters? In this case, travel. You and I have a shared passion for exposing our kids to travel in the world. Then we can build our life around that. I also wanted to just double click here, Maddy, on this idea of centering non work things. Because life, especially in New York City and some of these big across the country, I think in America, it's like work is who you are. Maddy, what do you do? Versus like, Maddy, who are you? I so love that there are other ways of thinking about identity and that we can do these shifts, not following the prescription early on or earlier on than now I'm about to be on my deathbed and what has my life been about? All right, Maddy, let's do lightning round. You ready?
I am ready.
Okay. Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate every time.
Cooking or takeout?
Cooking. I love cooking.
Climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
I have done both. If I was going to do it again, I'd probably climb another mountain. I don't want to die.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
Amusingly, yes, I totally have. It was totally stylish back when I was in high school. Come on, I'm old.
How would you rate your karaoke skills on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Mariah Carey?
I'm gonna go 7. Not because I'm a good singer. I'm an okay singer. I can carry a tune. You don't really want to hear me solo, but I'm really enthusiastic and I like to get other people involved in the singing. So I make it pretty fun for everyone. I love karaoke.
What's a recent book you read?
So I read this book called Love Lives Here. It is about a family where the daughter comes out as transgender, and then the father of the family comes out as transgender as well, and it's from the perspective of the mother. And it's just a really beautiful family story. And I have a trans son, and it was just really meaningful for me.
What's your favorite way to practice self care?
Exercising every single day and getting massages.
What's a good professional development you've done?
There was this course through an organization called Leading Elephants. It's called White Leaders Working on Anti-Racism. And it was just a really great sort of cohort-based way to learn more about equity and what we as white people can do, to help dismantle all of the oppressive systems.
What's your definition of a boss mama?
I would say a woman who is just crushing it, both at work and at home.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Get a little bit crazy. You're allowed. You're young.
And so, where can we find you, like LinkedIn or anywhere else?
Yep. So on LinkedIn, I'm at Madeline Tregidja Niebauer. vChief is also there on LinkedIn and on Facebook. Our website is virtualchiefofstaff.com. And then on Twitter, I'm Niebauer Maddy, and vChief is Virtual Chief on Twitter.
Great. And so, last question. Do you have a final ask, recommendation, or any parting thoughts to share?
Figure out what you're passionate about and just really live into it, because tomorrow is not promised.
It was real. Maddy, this has been such a delight. Thank you so much for your time and sharing all this wonderful wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. It is so much fun to talk about all of this stuff. I could do it all day. And if anybody wants to talk to me about it more, feel free to reach out because it's my favorite thing.
Thanks, Maddy.